I think people have been looking forward to this one for a little bit. J Leman, our Mondays with Jay, our All-American linebacker, talking about an Illinois victory over Iowa in which Illinois had 3 turnovers, no touchdowns, but a gritty Iowa-like win. Jay, just your thoughts, man. What's this mean for the program?
Well, first off, it's a huge win for the program to beat Wisconsin and Iowa, first time since '89. They've talked about that. But the way they did it, I've said this a couple of times this past weekend after that win, is we have often, snatched defeat from the jaws of victory because we just find ways to lose these games, right? But despite everything going wrong, you're out your kicker, right? And that's important when the only points are field goals. You're out your quarterback for 3/4 of the game, more than 3/4 of the game. You're out some really critical players. Taz Nicholson goes out early. Isaiah Williams out for the second half. You're out a lot of guys, right? Stuff is down, and you can feel like, man, something's going to break, but they didn't break. And I think most importantly, from a macro perspective, and we'll get into it, you have a 2-game advantage on Wisconsin and Iowa, which those teams, whether they're good or not, are going to do some damage and beat some teams down the line in that conference. There's no question to me. So to have that kind of advantage at this point in the season, you couldn't ask for much more.
Yeah, that's why the games coming up, including this one against Minnesota this week, is so important, these tiebreakers as you're talking about. But Jay, I love the analyst cap on you, but I do want to get for a second the alum cap back on J Leman.
Yeah, for sure.
What have these 2 games meant to you guys? I don't know how many people, former teammates, former Illini you're talking to, but what have these 2 games meant for you guys as alums to see Wisconsin, Iowa 5-1 and now ranked at number 24?
I mean, the amount of text messages and messages that I've got have been like exponential compared to what we usually get during the season, right? So I think there's a buzz, number one. But number 2, I think we're just really proud of where the program is at. I think we've always aspired to be Iowa, Wisconsin. And if we just look at just the numbers, the last 30 years have not been great in that department. So I think defensively, we're taking a lot of pride of us. Defensive guys are really proud of what's going on. I think we've got a really, really salty defense. But I also feel like it's not just about this season. They finally feel like we're headed in the right direction. I think for so long, there was an apathy among the alumni because they felt like the right guy wasn't at the helm. Whether that was Beckman, whether that was Cubitt, whether that was Lovey, there could be one-off flukish wins, and they would be excited about that. But I didn't think we were building toward a consistency of what a Big Ten West contender with a chance to go to Indy every year is. And I think that right there is the biggest thing, is that it's not so much the wins, which are evidence of we're headed in the right direction. The freight train is headed down the right course. And it's been so long since that's actually occurred.
Yeah, because what they're doing, whether they'll have a top 10 or top 1 defense, Jay, but like how they're building it feels sustainable, right?
Sure. No, this is the thing. I mean, I tell people, skilled players at some point, I love them, but they will fail you. Skilled defensive backs at some point, linebackers themselves, they will fail you. They will miss somebody in open space. When you're good up front, offensive and defensive line, they are the most consistent players over a span of a season. And when you get into late October, when you get into November, I'm telling you what, the reason Iowa is good during those games is they've got great defensive and offensive line playing historically. Now, they're a little bit young on the offensive line side. That's why their offense is struggling a lot, right? But I would say this, if we can keep this play up, it's only going to make us harder to defeat if we can stay healthy too, down the stretch. If you can play great defense, control line scrimmage, and this is key, it is what saved us, run the football. Let's not overlook the fact that Chase Brown had over 140 yards. I know he had 31 carries to do it, but just the ability to control the clock, to get 4, 5, 6 yards a carry when you need it, I think that's the big important thing we got to understand. We are built to win in October and November.
I don't have the stats in front of me, Jay, but I think the last 2 weeks you have outrushed Iowa and Wisconsin about 350 to 50.
Right. I mean, that's insane. And what I want to tell you too is if you look at the second half stats of every game, it is unbelievable. You think our defense is good? Look at the second half stats. and you'll see an amazing pattern. You look at what they did in Wisconsin. Look what they did against Iowa. You look at even the Virginia game. And what you'll see is this. You'll see a quarterback make some throws early. You'll see him have a presence in the pocket. You'll see the receivers use some schemes. We saw it early in the Wisconsin game. We saw Laporta get open early in the Illinois game, most of the game, but schematically, I'm talking they confused Sidney Brown and Quan on some mix up on some routes on that first third down. And they get people, right? They get the defense. They give up some plays, right? But as Bret calls it, the fire department comes to work, right? And you know, it's like we need this the CUFD, Champaign-Urbana Fire Department. We make hats CUFD, right? Rather than NYFD, right?
Are people gonna get the orange fireman hats? Like that's got to be a giveaway.
That would be cool. That would be really cool. The fire department, and we probably can't have axes and stuff because that's Wisconsin, Minnesota. But maybe fire extinguishers or something. So yeah, CUFD. That's my new thing, man. Champaign-Urbana Fire Department, and we partner with the fire. We have pictures and stuff. But I digress. You look at the second half of this team. What they do outside of obviously the Indiana game was an outlier, but even Indiana didn't do much in the second half on that last drive. We are wearing out their offensive line. We are wearing out their defensive line. We run the ball better and we get a lot more sacks in the second half. It's not just conditioning. We're physically dominating, wearing teams down. And I think that's important because the defense has kept us in the game close enough to be able to wear people down in the second half.
Jay, I'm glad you mentioned the Laporta thing. I think he had 99 yards in the first half on 5 catches. Second half, 4 catches, 1 yard. They just did an unbelievable job of adjusting to that. Anything else stand out about the defense besides the second half adjustments or the second half dominance? Like, why does this defense outside of Iowa struggling? What makes this defense so good? I'm asking you this every week.
Yeah. First off, great question. I just want to always give a shout out to Devin Weatherspoon. The guy sets the tone every game. I mean, he sets the tone first play of the game. This game, he did it in Indiana. They've stopped really throwing at him. I don't know if you've noticed this. They really try to pick on Jennings or Bailey, who was ever in there for Taz, right? They were focused on that. They wanted to get the ball to Laporta. And, quite honestly, they were trying to leave a lot of running backs in to help protect as well. They were trying to protect with 6 or 7 because they couldn't protect. So I do think I think the back end has been really solid. But I will say this, and that is, right now I just had an old defensive lineman calling me right now that I played with, just like,
supposed to talk ball, man.
It's like we want to know what's going on, right? Put this thing on airplane mode. I mean, that's the point that we're making. But I would say this is defensively, it all starts up front. Now, I think Tariq Barnes had his best game. D'Arcangelo, before he got hurt, played well. But Tariq Barnes did a great job as far as cleaning stuff up. I think you'll see the linebackers against these higher level teams make more plays, okay? Because the D-line's not going to make every play. But, Johnny Newton early in that game, near the goal line, how he sniffed out that shovel pass to Laporta, right? Great play. You see Keith Randolph so consistent over and over and over again, right? And these are well-trained, Iowa is an offensive line factory. And then on the edge, Seth Coleman definitely had his best game. We can definitely say that and made critical plays. Probably the most critical play was not even a sack. It's when he hit Petrus right as he was throwing the football and it led to the pick, right? And so I just thought up front, we are dominant. I think we have a top 5. I know we have a top defense, but we truly have a top 5 front. If you look at those, maybe not counting the DNs, but you look at our interior D linemen, we've got a top 5 front in the nation. I really believe that these guys are good.
Can I bring up Seth Coleman though? Jay, during the last 4 games, he has 24 pressures, according to Pro Football Focus, 3.5 sacks, 8 quarterback hurries, 2 pass breakups that basically are sacks, right? And he now leads the Big Ten with 25 pressures on the season. I'd imagine Johnny and Keith really help him, right? He gets a lot of one-on-ones, but what does he do so well on the edge? Because I think he's starting to make an all Big Ten case too. There's gonna be a lot of all Big Ten guys on this defense.
Sure. One, he's got really good length. I think Seth's always had the tools, right? If you look at his body and he has the length, you think you're playing hard. Seth would tell you he's playing hard all the time, like from his beginning. But I think there becomes a different level of effort and energy and putting out when you feel like I can get to the quarterback. Like there's an actual chance for me to get there, right? And I think he's playing with that. I think Kevin Kane's done a tremendous job with some of those outside backers of teaching technique. And one thing I like about Seth Coleman is he's not some wispy, like just rush specialist dude. All these guys, Akis included, can play the run as well, just as good as the pass. And so Seth can beat you with speed, but he's got some more power than I thought. And I think he's really upped his pass rush moves. It does help. He's often on an island because Johnny and or Keith usually demand one or two guys, on one of those guys.
All right, Jay, let's focus on the offense. Not a pretty day for them. Of course, when your quarterback goes out early, and we know how important Tommy DeVito has been for this team. Sitkowski comes in. Obviously, the offense changes. How did it change when Sitkowski came in?
Well, first off, let's look from a points perspective. People often say like every stat is overrated other than points, right? Scoring defense and scoring offense. That's all that matters, right? I mean, there's things that set up that. And so, first of all, I think Illinois would have won this game 20-6 if DeVito's in the game. I really do. I think it's a different ball game, okay? Listen, Art, I think, did better than what I'd seen him last year. I mean, last year he really struggled throwing the football. His numbers weren't all that bad, but it's a very basic offense. It was a kind of if this guy's open, throw it. If not, kind of look around, maybe run the ball with Art, right? So I think it changed the entire game plan. So that's not easy on Barry Lunny, right? Because I think he had called plays specific for DeVito, and by Bret's own admission, the ones get 80% of the reps and the twos get 20%. So he wasn't necessarily ready. And I don't think Isaiah, who's kind of the safety valve, had his best game. I think that's fair to say, right? At all. I mean, really struggled in that stretch, dropping some punts, fumbled on the Wildcat, fumbled on, the play, whether he had control or not, it was called a fumble. And then obviously got concussed. I was surprised he wasn't the guy they were going to over and over and over again when Art was in there, because he's the most consistent, right? Or Pat Bryant, and Pat Bryant had a quiet night, right? But I think Art did enough. It brought me back to last year. We used to like exhale when we got like a completion of a pass. Yep. I was back in that mode. Like when they hit Hightower on that throw, I think that was early fourth quarter. I was like, and then he hit Jonah Morris. He had two throws that were like, bam. Yep. I was like floored, right? I'm like, that's the thing. I was kind of like, so it definitely changed it. I know I'm talking more about Sitkowski, but I will hats off to this offensive line too. They protected Sitkowski, and they wore down Iowa's front, which is a good front. They ran for a chase to run for $140 on Iowa's front. I mean, say what you want to say. That's impressive.
I thought they had their best game. 200 rushing yards, 0 sacks. Then you watch the film; they were moving people. That's a pretty good front. That's a really good front. I want to ask you, Jay. It's hard as a play caller, I'd imagine, when your backup quarterback comes in and he's not as dynamic as Tommy. He's not as comfortable. He's not as confident. But there are obviously some play calls I think Barry Lunny would like back. 3rd and 5 and 4 down territory. You throw that screen pass that gets snuffed out, and that might take points off the board, or takes at least a 4th down try off the board. Obviously, the Art throw, you can't throw that ball. You can't throw that interception. But do you want to give it in your quarterback's hands in that opportunity?
I think it was wasn't it 2nd and 4 from the 4, right?
Yeah, 2nd and 4 from the 4. Right. I know you haven't been great goal line, Jay, getting the push outside of the sneaks, but those are 2 plays I would imagine Barry Lunny wants back. What did you think?
Well, I think those 2 plays. I also think, Art on the 3rd and 10 for the quarterback draw where he fumbled.
I think it'd be conservative, be really conservative, right?
Yeah. Okay. So you give it to a guy who hasn't handled the ball much, right? And I didn't like. So let's just break down these plays. 1, they were in the 4 down territory. They ran that screen, was completely snuffed out. What I like about Barry Lunny, he's not afraid to take chances. So I will give him props on that, right?
Yeah, and I always say it's easy in hindsight to do.
It's easy in hindsight. And if he makes the play, great. Should have Art thrown away the pass on 2nd and 4? Sure. He should have just thrown that thing out of bounds or tucked it and ran for no gain, right? Do I wish we would have? I thought we had a lot of success, which I was surprised, getting on the edge with the little quick pitch So I would have liked to see that down at the goal line. Like I just felt like Chase had uncommon patience and could get to the edge like we wanted him to. So I would have liked to see that play. And I absolutely, as a defender, I was just licking my chops if I'm with Iowa once they motion Chase Young out of the backfield. Yes. And it's like, okay, well, it's a pass or it's quarterback draw. I'm not worried about the pass, and I'm not really worried about quarterback draw. So I felt like your options were very limited on what I thought was a very critical third down. Obviously, it was tied, right, from like the 20. And so, and then thank God, his elbow gets down because he's on top of that defender. His knee's not down. It's his forearm and his elbow. And so I think Barry would want to have those calls back. I've been really impressed with Barry. I think the offense is making strides. I think not having Tommy completely threw off the game plan a bit, not a bit, a lot. I think Art did what he needed to do to keep the game close. Only one turnover, but we could have blown that game open. In the fourth quarter, we were offensively dominating them. Yep. We really were. We wore them out. They were getting dominated, but we were not finishing drives, right? And so I give a lot of credit to that offensive line. I know the defense was huge. I think the offensive line is really the unsung hero of this game.
I agree. I thought they had an A performance in that game. So, Jay, we're recording this about an hour before Bret Bielema's press conference. I don't expect him to give anything to Minnesota about Tommy DeVito's health.
Sure.
Certainly it was an ankle, re-aggravated. At least he was moving around. He was on the bike a little bit. But if he can't go, if he has a week, and he's going to have a week to prepare for Art Sitkowski, because I imagine Tommy DeVito won't practice very much. What changes with the approach if he's got a week with Art Sitkowski leading into Minnesota? How much better can they get? More comfortable can they get?
Yeah, so great question. It's my opinion. I have no inside intel. I have no idea about injuries. It's my opinion that DeVito will probably, because there's a bye week after this, they want to give him 3 weeks to get back and have that run, right? At the same time, we went up to Minnesota last year, and beat him with Brandon Peters, I think, at quarterback, correct? I don't think Sitkowski was playing. I think Sitkowski was hurt at that point, right? It really owned Minnesota. But how does it change, right? Well, number one, I think that Sitkowski is going to be vastly improved from this week to next week. So that's the good news, right? The bad news is I don't think he's going to be as good as Tommy DeVito is. Okay? So that's the bad news. I do think they're going to give him a couple plays to get comfortable. I think Isaiah Williams, they want to get his confidence back. They're going to get him involved in the game early. I think you're going to see the tight ends used. I do think that. And I think that's been kind of asleep the last couple of games. I think they'll get back in the tight ends because of the short throws. I think they also want to get Pat Bryant involved. I think we'll do all this. But the main thing is this. If Chase Brown runs for 150 yards, Illinois is probably going to win. Because they're going to control the clock enough, number one. And number two, their defense is going to keep them in the game. So really, comes down to Art. Can you get those 3 to 6 first downs that Tommy can get us? We saw him get that with his legs early on too, Tommy, in the game. And can he make those certain throws? It comes down to those 3 to 6, critical times that you need the first down. And so do I think it'll be better? Yes. Do I think they're going to tailor the game plan to him? Yes. Do I think that the fire department, AKA the defense, is going to have to be on 24-hour shifts? Yes. Right. I think everybody's going to have to be on it. And a lot of it is predicated on how healthy is Mo Ibrahim with the running back for Minnesota. He didn't play 2 weeks ago against Purdue. They've had a bye week. Could be very similar to, us losing DeVito is kind of like us losing Mo Ibrahim, kind of, not totally, but it's a critical player.
Yeah, Minnesota had an off week, Jay. When DeVito is healthy, I think these two teams are kind of like looking into a mirror. I think Illinois' defense probably has more talent, but just the way they're built, the way they operate. So what are the keys, do you think, to Illinois pulling this off against Minnesota? And as we talked about before, you get a tiebreaker on Minnesota and Iowa and Wisconsin, you're setting yourself up pretty well for a Big Ten West race. And of course, games against Nebraska and Purdue are going to be important, but
sure,
that'd be, as you said, 2-game separation on Minnesota if you can pull this off.
You would have to say, at least from Purdue has had some impressive road wins. I got to give them credit. I think we always discount Purdue a little bit. We probably shouldn't. They had 9 wins last year, right? But I will say this. I think in looking at the conference overall, if you have a head-to-head on these three teams, which we three in a row, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, you're in the driver's seat. I mean, if you have a two-game, and it is looking in the mirror. I think both of these teams, like you said, want to dominate the time of possession. No question, right? I think Minnesota more than us. I mean, the funniest thing is we can be a hurry-up, no-huddle offense, but still have great time of possession, which is an interesting thing, right? But I think who's going to win the time of possession, who can get off of the field, right? Because what you don't want is Mo Ibrahim to run for 4 yards on first and second down. They run a little slant route. They get a first down barely, and they just kind of chew away and limit your offensive possessions and wear down your defense. Now, I think what's going to be critical in this game, and it always is turnovers, okay? We were 0 for 3 for turnovers until late in that game, right? We were down 3-0 in turnovers against Iowa, and then we got the pick. I think it's going to be very difficult. I know the fire department's great. I think it's going to be very difficult to win this game and without winning the turnover battle. I really do. I think it's going to be hard because I think Tanner Morgan's a better. I know I've hated on Tanner Morgan for years. I've had to eat that a couple of times that I said he was the worst quarterback in the West. I no longer think that. I think he's a good player. Certainly doesn't have the weapons he's had in past years at receiver, but he's a better quarterback than Spencer Petras, and they're going to be able to throw the ball better, and I think they're going to be better offensively. I don't think I know statistically they're better maybe than Iowa defensively, maybe a little bit, maybe they're equal, but I think Illinois will be able to move the ball better on Minnesota than Iowa for sure.
So Jay, do you have an Iowa take right now? I mean, it's weird seeing Wisconsin and Iowa both really wounded here, but what do you make about what's going on there?
I think I honestly think I don't have Iowa's schedule in front of me, but I would imagine that Iowa finishes the season with 7 to 8 wins, and they go to a bowl game and they win their 8th or 9th game. They're a typical Iowa team. They're not great. They're going to get better as the year goes on. Their offense goes on. Their offensive line is going to be better. They've got some serious systemic offensive issues schematically, right? Here's the thing. If they have a young offensive line, they will have offensive years like this for sure. I mean, that's what it is. If they have a veteran offensive line, they'll score 20, 25 points a game. They're never going to be huge, right? But remember, their defense last year, until they played Michigan, had a streak of like 50 games, not giving up 24 more points, right? So they don't need to do that. So I think it's your typical Iowa team. It's not one of your great Iowa teams. I don't think there's, and I think Wisconsin's going to go to a bowl.
Yep.
I don't think Wisconsin's not going to a bowl. I think Purdue's going to go to a bowl. So it's not like there's walks in the park, but I will say, I do think it is a critical juncture in the Big Ten West history, not just because of UCLA and USC, right? We've got Frost out. We've got, obviously, Christ is out. We've got Northwestern, presumably weaker and worse than we've seen them maybe ever in the Pat Fitzgerald era. And that's a strong word. I mean, some of those early years, they weren't great. But if we look at the last decade, they've been a very formidable opponent, went to a lot of bowl games. Right?
Can I jump in here, Jay? Yeah. Like, this is going to be the third time in 4 years that they have won 3 or fewer games. And this could be the third year out of 4 that they win one Big Ten game. I don't know if they're going to win another Big Ten game. I know they won a Big Ten West championship, but he's got to reevaluate his program, right? Pat Fitzgerald's going to stay there. He should. He's built up so much there, and he's a really good coach. But they got to be looking internally there.
I think since Mike Hankwitz left, their defense has not been the same. Whether it's because of players, I know they had a bunch of backers leave, some DBs there that went to the NFL in the first round. But Jim O'Neill has struggled. I mean, the defense has struggled under Jim O'Neill, right? I think he's a good guy. Mike Bajakian, his first year, with the transfer portal of Peyton Ramsey and that shortened season that kind of caught lightning in a bottle, right? And I think they won the West, maybe with a 6-2 record, I think. And it was enough to get them in. But since then, the offense has really struggled. Haven't had a good quarterback, right? And so, and even some of their better players, I don't think can play great. I don't think Peter Skoronski, who people projected as a NFL first rounder, I saw him getting beat sometimes by some guys at Miami of Ohio, not playing maybe as well as he should have. I still think he's a great player. But the reality is we've never seen the West on this kind of footing. I mean, it is shaky. I mean, they always say some big earthquake's going to hit the Midwest or the New Madrid fault line, right? Maybe it finally hit the Big Ten West. The earth is quaking, and finally, Illinois seems to be one of the most secure, solid programs in the West. And other than what I would say Minnesota, which is solid, I would say Purdue, they have their plan of what they want to be, right? But Illinois, you look at what they're doing, what Bret's doing, the recruiting trail, the staff that he's put together, how long can they keep Ryan Walters? I think the over and under is probably 8 more games, right? I mean, it's probably about it. I mean, hopefully this last 6 games, the Big Ten championship and a bowl game. Hopefully we keep him longer. But I just think he's that hot of a commodity. But Illinois has really ascended the last 3 or 4 weeks to, hey, this is a stable program in the West.
Yeah, they're taking advantage of it. And why I bring you on this podcast, Jay, is not only the great analysis, it's the New Madrid fault line reference.
Yeah, the New Madrid, right? I mean, I was no geologist back in the day, but I heard of the big one. In 2008, there was a tremor I felt when I was in Champaign. I don't know if you guys remember this. It shook. And, there's always the big one. If you watch, Nostradamus Prophecies 4, they say there's a huge one that's going to happen, in 36 or something, and all of Lake Michigan's going to split open and pour down into Illinois. I mean, it's like crazy stuff, right? But I would just say this, things are changing in the Big Ten West. I feel like we finally got a program builder in Bret Bielema. And I'm going to be the first one to say this. I know people think, to a degree, Bret Bielema is a retread coach. Some people said that, dude, he's already done his thing. For some reason, there's a huge stigma on college football coaches. Once they get fired, it's like a scarlet letter. It's like, we can't rehire this guy for the most part, right? And in pros, they just change jobs. I mean, John Fox just traded jobs for years. I mean, whether he was a great coach or not. But I'm telling you right now, if Bret Bielema wins 9 games, 10 games, he's in the discussions for some bigger coaching jobs. I know people might not want to believe that, but I believe that. To come here in Illinois to do something he hasn't done in a long time, and that's the scary thing. I hope Josh wraps him up in a big-time contract.
Well, I think that's the one thing you got going for you. Some people have brought this up with me, Jay, when I go on other shows. They're like, well, Bret Bielema was doing this in Illinois. He could go to greener pastures. He's done that, right? And it didn't work out for him. Yeah. I do think for him, this is a legacy. Feels like his legacy. Like he could be the guy at Illinois, get the statue. If you go somewhere else, he's going to have to win in 3 years. Otherwise, they might want him gone, right? If he's going to a bigger job. But the other thing is we've seen Josh Whitman pour in resources, right? Sure. $80 million practice facility, paying Ryan Walters, paying his staff, the type of salaries that you see at Michigan and some of these other places. So it's a fair point when anyone brings up that possibility. But I do think Whitman's going to be all in on this. I would expect a massive contract extension.
We got to say this. I don't know how this happened, but Josh Whitman raised $80 million for the Smith Center when Lovie Smith was the head coach, when apathy was like low. Amazing. They needed more money for Lunny to fire Peterson and get Lane. Needed more money for Walters. They've done it. And I do believe that they will shell out the money to keep Bret if the season keeps on going. As if we finish the back half of the season 5-1 and have a 10-win season, watch out.
Is the bar for him to win Big Ten Coach of the Year, win the Big Ten West? Is it 8 wins? Is it 9 wins? Because like if PJ wins, Minnesota wins the West, he's got a great. Jeff Brom wins, whatever. And Ryan Day just kind of gets overlooked at this point. But Bret Bielema right now would be the leader in the clubhouse for that award.
I think absolutely. I don't know. It was a stat when Urban was a coach that they had not won like Coach of the Year at Ohio State since like 79. I don't know if somebody's done that. They probably had it before them, but 1 or 2 times maybe. I'm not sure. I have to look it up. But, Harbaugh had a great year last year. He's probably not going to get it. Penn State's Penn State. So I do think if Bret gets into that 9-10 win area, I think he's the Big Ten Coach of the Year. Does he have to win the West? Probably. Yeah. Probably has to win the West to get it done. But that's very attainable from where we're at right now.
Pretty amazing, Jay. Fun times, fun to talk about with you as always. Thanks for making us football smarter, man. We'll talk to you next week.
You got it, man. New Madrid fault line.